From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. And we have returned. Again, as we said, there are mission-critical problems with the system as it stands today. Even a lot of tissue banks will say the same thing. They may be, for the record, talking about their competitors, but everybody knows there's a problem. These families are not paid, but these for-profit bank brokers are definitely making a ghoulish amount of cash. One of the sources I referenced earlier, the American Association of Tissue Banks, a trade organization representing these folks, says the following when they say, how does NADO, that's the acronym they prefer, a non-transplant anatomical donation organization, how do they collect funding? Their quote is, in order to sustain a mission of helping donors and their loved ones fulfill their wishes to aid researchers, educators, and clinicians in advancing science and medicine, most often at no cost to the donor or his or her loved ones, NADOs must fund their operations by charging a fee for service to those who are requesting and being provided non-transplant gifts. So they're basically saying what we said. They're just trying to make it sound a bit more diplomatic, right? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, we got to get a donation.
That's right. I kind of wonder what their balance sheets look like, because obviously they're providing value to some of these lower income families in exchange for their loved ones by, offering the cremation and the funeral process and all of that stuff to pay for. Like, is that considered the cost of doing business? Is that like recouped? I'd be really fascinated to see what their ledgers look like.
Mm-hmm. That's if they're actually using a standard crematorium, right? An actual thing that's meant to cremate human bodies, because that's not always the case.
Absolutely.
Because those are expensive as hell. Mm-hmm. Back to that Reuters article, they mention a couple of instances where bodies were being cremated, if you call that cremated, within medical waste incinerators, which is just it's a different system. They also, and I couldn't tell you the difference, but
they also were.
But it does probably mean that the cremains are not pure, right?
Right.
You're getting some stuff, your loved ones in part, but probably some other mix-ins in there.
You're often only getting. Yeah, this is what I want to say. You're often getting adulterated remains. You could compare it to a mass grave at times, which I was on the fence about mentioning on air, but it's true. You're also getting only a portion of the person's body being cremated and the rest being shipped off. This is a ghoulish way to make money for a lot of bad faith actors. They also take a lot of agency away from the family of a donor. It is not infrequent for body brokers to obtain a corpse through fraudulent means, misleading the loved ones and the survivors. There's another story that I saw in multiple places. Doris Stouffer, when she passed away, her family, in particular her son, donated her body to science because Doris, they thought, would be able to help with further research into Alzheimer's. And there's a lot of exciting, promising research going into Alzheimer's right now. So this makes sense. And it's been going on for years. So her son, Jim Stouffer, contacts an outfit called Biological Resource Center. What do we always say about organizations with cartoonishly vague, innocuous names? Just watch out. Just watch out for them. Yeah, this was a company locally based in Arizona. This story takes place in Sunrise, Arizona, and they broker the donation of human bodies for research. When he contacted them, they were on the ground in an hour, dispatching a driver to collect the body. So he signs a form. Keep in mind, he's in the depths of grief. His mother has passed away, and he authorizes medical research on her body. And then, importantly, he checks a specific box on this form. It's a boilerplate form that prohibits military, traffic safety, and other, quote, non-medical experiments. 10 days later, he and his family receive her cremated remains. And then later, they learn what actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So workers at BRC detached one of Doris Stouffer's hands for cremation, as you mentioned, only getting partial remains back. After sending those ashes back to her son, the company sold and shipped the rest of her body to a taxpayer-funded research project for the U.S. Army. So that box that Jim Stouffer ticked, clearly either they didn't care or it was not legally binding. It was just kind of like, for optics. Her brain was never used for Alzheimer's research. Instead, Stouffer's body became part of an Army experiment to measure damage caused by roadside bombs.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of at least 20 other cadavers that were used in this same way. I don't know that we necessarily know the source of the other bodies. Was this all through the same organization?
Unknown, not necessarily. It would not be. It's possible, but it also wouldn't be uncommon for there to be multiple contractors or sourcers here. Sourcers, I mean, not sorcerers.
Just really quickly, guys, I didn't realize that human remains would be used for, what was it, quote, traffic safety?
Mm-hmm.
Like testing traffic
I
safety.
use those crash test
Yep,
dummies.
I've got a car stuff episode on that. Corpses were used for a while to test, all those old car commercials where you see the car hitting the wall. They used to, until they built crash test dummies, they used to just use corpses. Also, I want to take out a moment to shout out Project Sunshine. We did an episode on that. If you would like to learn more about the unethical ways in which your government uses human bodies, and it's not restricted to the U.S., and it's not something that happens as a historical footnote. But yeah, they've been using
with children too.
Yes, that was usually using the body parts of children to test radiation.
Do we know around what year the testing was done there on Doris? It sounds like it was, research for maybe around the Afghanistan or Iraq wars. Just I'm imagining roadside bombs. They were very interested in that at the time.
Let's see. So it was I want to say 2015.
Oh,
or
wow.
so. No, I want to say maybe a little before 2015. So it may have been 2014. The good news is that the Stouffer family did later see justice because there was a lawsuit against Biologic Resource Center and its owner, one Stephen Gore. Talk about nominative determinism. Gore pled guilty to running an illegal operation because of the fraud he was committing, and he pled guilty in 2015, but he was sentenced to probation. Although I think it's hard to argue this is a victimless crime.
I think it would be hard to swallow an argument, but I could imagine the argument being made.
Yeah, too true. I mean, and it is very difficult to articulate how horrific this can be for survivors of these situations. Brokers, as we established, can turn a profit of thousands of dollars for each body donated because their margin is so low, right? And because we know a little bit about their profit margin, I'm not saying the arguments about being servants of a greater good are wrong. I'm not even saying they're insincere, but it's a little tougher to believe them. You know what I mean? I think you were right to be skeptical. And eventually, the good news is more and more people began to listen to the experts who were saying this is basically the Wild West in a terrible way. Something has to be done. So politicians began to further understand the extent of this problem, and they started to take legal action. In the U.S., we're proud to report just last year, Congress has brought more transparency and accountability to this grisly industry, or they're trying to, through the introduction of something called the Consensual Donation and Research Integrity Act, which you can read in full, available online. It's not a law yet, but it very much should be.
And it seems to be gathering a lot of support, which is positive.
Yes. I mean, think about where we were, guys. There were private companies popping up all over the country here in the U.S. that were new body brokers with just a name. You start a business. There was no regulation really, and you what you needed were a couple of freezers, maybe an array of freezers, let's say, depending on how many bodies you wanted to handle at a time, and at least one cargo van or shipping vehicle of some sort. And that's literally all you need. The actual product that you're going to be brokering and selling gets donated to you, right? It's free. Then you get to make straight profit off that thing. And then shipping costs is literally your only other issue. It's crazy how much money could be made for very little investment up front. And thank goodness there's some kind of regulation happening.
Well, on the way. Hopefully
Yeah,
it does end up being
happening.
actual regulation, but fortunately for what I would typify as the larger majority of good guys in this scenario, hopefully for decent people, you'll take a little bit of reassurance knowing that even the most Machiavellian politician has to understand that voting against the bill like this is political suicide. You know what I mean? Like, how big is the grave robbing lobby is the kind of question they'll have back, in the back rooms of the campaign office.
Well, I think one thing we haven't really talked too much about is just the fact that for not only is there grief involved and people, maybe of lower means being taken advantage of when they're at their, maybe lowest point, but also just the idea of religion and what the way a body is handled means for individuals' religions, and how the reality of what's actually happening once people find out, or if they ever find out, it could absolutely negate these deepest, most, sacredly held beliefs, and could cause some serious trauma and concern with individuals that are worried now maybe their loved ones aren't going to the afterlife properly because of the way their corpse was handled.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I had looked into that as well, and a little bit of it was cutting for time, but one of the most amazing things is the way that religions interact with the modern day. And there's a pretty impressive argument that a lot of religions have made about what they see as being a good person. The idea is that, because you might be surprised to find that some religions that have very specific requirements for how a body is treated after death, or after physical death, I should say, they allow for organ donation. They allow for the contribution of a greater good. And the leaders of these schools of spiritual thought have spent a great deal of time thinking about this. And I commend that decision, to say, like, hey, what is more noble than saying, I know my heart's been through a lot, but I would love if it was beating for you. I think that's pretty impressive.
I think you have another career ahead of you as a greeting card writer, Ben.
Oh, very good. Thank you. I almost did get a job one time writing for Hallmark, but they wanted you to move
Fair.
to like Hallmark headquarters. Yeah, I know, right? But that was before everybody worked from home. At this point, maybe it's important for us to say that the future of the body broker industry, I don't know. It's tough to predict where it's going to go, because, again, there's a genuine need. Some of our fellow conspiracy realists are alive because of the research and the discoveries that came from these practices. And honestly, unless something big changes in the United States specifically, families often are going to need some kind of financial assistance to bury or cremate their loved ones or inter them with the respect that, they deserve, that every human being deserves. So how do we ensure those wishes are upheld? How can we help both the living and the dead have full knowledge of what they're agreeing to? I don't know. These aren't rhetorical questions. I don't know I don't know if anyone knows the answer.
Somehow make funerals less expensive. Good God.
I mean, but it all comes down to a free market economy. Like if you're able to set up a business that does a service that you are paid for, then you have a right to charge what you want for it. You know, it's hard. It's a hard thing to police, I guess is what I'm getting at, unless you make it part of a government entity and just regulate the hell out of it.
Well, I'll give you a quote from a dude named Steve Palmer, who, according to the Reuters investigation, is an Arizona mortician who serves on that thing you're talking about, Ben, the National Funeral Directors Association.
Mm-hmm.
He serves on their policy board. His quote is, "Some funeral home directors are saying, cremation isn't paying the bills anymore, so let me see if I can help people harvest some body parts."
Mm-hmm. And
okay, then.
Yeah, check out our episode on the funeral industry as well. And thanks to all the people in the funeral industry who wrote to us about that and gave us an insider peek. There is going to be one other phrase that you'll hear associated with body brokers. It describes a different, also at times equally unethical profession. It is the concept of getting kickbacks for referring clients to specific rehab facilities when they struggle with substance abuse. And that is a huge business we talked about in the past. I'm trying to find an ending for this episode that is something better than people are terrible. Funerals should cost less.
Terrible.
Hashtag not all people are terrible. There we go. Hashtag not all people are terrible. Funerals should be less expensive.
I endorse this message.
And this has been endorsed by Matt Frederick, first of his name.
For president.
It's been endorsed by Matt Frederick for president. If you want to find out more about our dark money political action campaign to get our pal Matt elected to the highest office in the land, or if you want to give us your thoughts on the ethical dilemma of this trade, on the potential for just heartbreaking corruption and conspiracy versus the potential for enormous breakthroughs in medicine, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us, like Noel said, at mattfrederickforpresident.com or we had .org. We are
my entire
we are a for-profit presidential campaign. So
yeah, and literally that's my entire platform. Not all bad.
Our only donor is Illumination Global Unlimited. Don't worry about that though. It's fine.
Yes.
It's fine.
But if you don't want to dive with us into the world of crooked politics just yet, there are also plenty of other places you can find us on.